They say the quiet ones are the easiest to rattle. I guess Claire wanted to test that theory. Hi, I'm Maya. I live in Miami, and I run client strategy at a mid-sized creative agency. Today, I'm sharing a personal story about what happens when someone decides your life is their problem, how steadiness can become armor, and how winning a battle can sometimes cost you the very thing you thought you were protecting. The first time Claire yelled at me, the conference room was half full, and the air smelled faintly of stale coffee and printer toner. It was abrupt, a flare of anger that cut across a client presentation. A sentence lobbed at me so loud the client flinched. "How did you miss that?" she snapped. "This is basic." Everyone in the room turned. Some people looked embarrassed for her. Some looked annoyed at me, just to be safe. I kept my face still. I answered the question. I finished the presentation. Later, when the adrenaline eased, my hands were steady as they folded the slides away. I did not know then that Claire's anger was a pattern and not an incident. I did not know she had kept a little ledger of everything she perceived as slights against her, dated notes, jealous phrases, petty gripes. I did not know she resented the way my fiance, Daniel, and I had fallen into each other's lives like two pages that found their binding. I did not know that her resentment was old history repurposed into a daily sport. We had been engaged for 4 months when the campaign started. Daniel and I were careless about announcing dates and details because we were buoyant. People loved weddings at our agency. Cupcakes appeared in the kitchen. Someone hand-lettered a small banner. It should have been simple, joyful. Then Claire's maneuvers began as small, ugly tests of what she could provoke. She invited me to a Friday night drinks event and followed the invitation with a private message. "Don't come." We canceled. She typed those words the same way one might tuck a needle into a pincushion, with small pleasure. I did not go, because I believed her. The next morning, someone posted photos of the party on the group channel. Claire's smile in the picture was bright, and a little too triumphant. Later, she invited me to lead a proposal for a new client. I spent 3 late nights drafting slides, aligning case studies, and procrastinating sleep because we both knew how much winning this pitch would mean for my team and for the company. When I uploaded my sections into our shared drive, Claire messaged, "I'm going to go in a different direction. Thanks." I watched the final presentation roll out to the client with her name on the lead slide. I kept my face still. When you refuse to show shock, you deny the bully an audience. That seemed to make Claire frantic. She ramped to public humiliation, whispered accusations in open plan spaces, a staged concern in a team meeting about my reliability, and, one awful day, a full-throated yelling match in front of 20 colleagues and a video recorder that someone later confessed to having captured. The clip ended up in the company's shared chat like a fossil, ugly, unblurred, and undeniable. I didn't retaliate. I didn't sob in the hallway or issue angry emails. People told me I must be thrilled that her tactics weren't working. They thought calm was a cloak of invulnerability. But keeping still was not effortless. It was a decision. Each day I chose to collect my breath and my evidence and to treat the room as a courtroom in which I would not cry on the stand. There are moments when being reasonable feels like a radical act. The first time Claire lunged for applause by calling me incompetent in front of a client, I felt the hands in my chest clench. The natural reflex was to strike back, to shout, to tell. But I imagined, instead, the long slog of litigation and the slow erosion of my reputation if I let emotion steer me. So I began to document, carefully and clinically. Not because I wanted to be cruel, but because cruelty was how someone without power kept score. My documentation was boring. Screenshots of invitations and cancellations. File history showing timestamps and authorship. Copies of Slack messages where she shifted blame onto me. Emails where she thanked people privately for covering when she orchestrated a spectacle. I even saved the recording of the outburst, a 2-minute clip where her voice cracked and her accusations were as clear as glass. I labeled everything, put it in chronological order, and kept it in a folder that was password protected and unseen by anyone else. I also reached carefully for allies. I don't like making scenes, and I hate gossip, but I know the world has rooms where justice can be arranged if things are brought there patiently. 2 colleagues, Priya in accounts and Marco on creative, had seen the party photos and had been irritated by them. They agreed to attest to what they had witnessed. Another, Ben from Analytics, had the video of Claire screaming. He gave me a copy and asked that I keep it confidential. With a dossier in hand, I considered my options. HR is an instrument, and like any instrument, it can be used well or poorly. I wasn't naive. I know HR can be political. But I also know that a well-presented, well-evidenced case is harder to rewrite into fiction. I made an appointment with Talia, our HR lead, and presented the evidence, calmly, methodically, with no flourish. I framed it as a concern about workplace conduct and the erosion of team morale. I emphasized the need for a protective process, not for revenge. Talia listened. She asked procedural questions, quiet and precise. Then she recommended an internal investigation and suggested measures to protect the team while it proceeded. Claire was informed and interviewed. She offered the same explanation she had offered at the start, that she was testing dynamics, that she hadn't meant harm, that she was passionate in her delivery. But people do not usually invent recorded outbursts. The evidence did its work. In the weeks that followed, Claire received a formal warning and was placed on a performance improvement plan. She had to attend conflict resolution training and submit to regular check-ins. The company issued a memo about respectful conduct. The office iced over with awkwardness for a while, and then, slowly, life resumed with fewer traps. For a time, I felt vindicated in the way a person feels after cleaning a wound and seeing the scab finally fall away. And then Daniel found the dossier. He had been supportive at every step. He had listened while I described the tiny humiliations and had held my hand on hard nights. He had told me, more than once, that he was proud of how I handled myself. But in a small moment of curiosity, a curiosity much like the others that had started this whole saga, he accidentally opened an attachment I had saved to my cloud, part of the collection of screenshots, the message logs, the brief transcription of Claire's outburst. He did not open the whole folder. He did not sit in the meeting with Talia. He only saw the evidence, glancing at timestamps and the clipped language, and he reacted in a way I had not anticipated. "Did you set out to build this?" he asked later in our kitchen, where the light fell in squares and the coffee machine hummed. His voice was private and not accusatory in intent, but the words landed like stones. "I wanted protection," I said. "I wanted to stop the campaign. I wanted something that would speak louder than her theatrics." He was quiet for a long time. This is where love reveals its shape, in what it fears. Daniel's fear was that I had become someone who measured life with evidence and used proofs as a scalpel. He worried that if I could assemble a dossier to bring a teammate down, I could also archive any slight and brand a person guilty. He worried that my calmness was not peace but strategy. Maybe I wanted safety, I said, because it was true. Maybe I wanted control because I was scared. But I didn't want to hurt you. He ran a hand through his hair. "I know you were scared. I understand that. But the dossier, it's like you interviewed people, gathered testimony. It looks surgical. It looks like you were building a case, Maya. I don't know if I want to be with someone who builds cases." Saying that felt like a new kind of blow. I tried to explain process, to show him the parts I had never shown anyone. The names of colleagues who insisted they, too, had been uncomfortable. The ways Claire's antics had destabilized client work. The nights I sat awake trying to imagine what would happen if I ignored it. He listened, because he listened well, because that is the quality that had drawn me to him. But rational words do not always repair the place where trust is lacerated. We fought in tiny, quiet circles for weeks. He accused me, gently, of preferring proof to mercy. I argued that mercy does not protect teams or reputations. Documentation does. Our arguments were not dramatic. They were necessary and exacting, like someone measuring for a joint where two boards must meet. He began to withdraw, not in anger, but in fissure. He wanted reassurance that I would not let a fear of unfairness persuade me to collect evidence against the people we loved. I could not promise that I would never gather facts again, because I might, for myself or for someone else, and because some things cannot be unseen. But I gave my word that I would try to keep softness in my life. Sometimes words are not enough. A few weeks after his initial discovery of the dossier, Daniel told me he needed time. He wanted to think about whether the person he imagined marrying, the messy, laughing, uncounted person, was still in there. He moved his things out for a month. We tried counseling. We tried long phone calls. We tried to disentangle the woman who had learned to protect herself from the one he loved. But fidelity of character is not a garment you can iron back into being on a whim. Claire's campaign ceased. She left the company 3 months later, after more people came forward with their stories and after the leadership made it clear that there would be consequences for continued hostility. Some days I felt triumphant, as you feel after following through on a plan that saves a life. The studio felt safer in subtle ways. Fewer ambushes, freer meetings, less theatrical anger spilling into client rooms. The change felt good and right. But the victory tasted thin when Daniel returned a few months later to tell me he had met someone else, not on a lark, not with malice, but with the slow and gentle flavor of two people who had the same tolerance for ambiguity. He told me he admired my strength, but that he did not want to live in a life where pain could be archived and used like evidence. He wanted to marry the version of me who would be open to messy forgiveness, not the one who would preserve every slight. It is a strange thing to win at public dignity and lose the private thing you treasure. I had protected my career, the culture of my team, and a dozen people's daily peace. I had preserved the workplace from further small cruelties. But in the process I had become, in his eyes, someone who used strategy in places that once felt sacredly unmeasured. The end of our engagement was not dramatic. There were no slammed doors or furious letters. There were boxes moved and conversations that felt like the steady, necessary unpicking of two people who had simply grown into people who wanted different futures. He said, gently, "I love you, but I love the idea of softness more." I said, quietly, "I love you, and I will miss that softness you gave me." In the months after, I found myself watching other people in small ways. I caught myself inventorying slights and thinking about evidence like a habit I could not shake. Sometimes I thought I would go back in time and choose differently. Perhaps I could have sought mediation earlier. Perhaps I could have involved a neutral third party before the documentation began. Perhaps I could have put my hand on Daniel's shoulder and said, "I'm scared," instead of securing a file like a shield. But then I would recall the meeting where Claire's shouting had left a client pale, and the nights I had sat with the hot, cold panic of feeling watched and made small, and I could not imagine letting that happen again without making a plan. There is a cost to almost every form of courage. I had bought safety at work at the cost of a softer private life. If there is comfort in that bargain, it is small and precise. I sleep in a room that does not echo with whispers. My team meets in a space that is less performative and more functional. The office is kinder in tiny ways, and the people who work there do their jobs without fearing daily humiliation. But the private cost is a bruise that takes its own time to heal. I miss the ordinary habit of being surprised by kindness without rehearsal. I miss sharing a morning coffee that is just alive with small, unmeasured talk. Sometimes I imagine Daniel laughing at something small and think, with a sharpness I did not know I possessed, of the day he found the dossier. I imagine both of us on different paths that looped away from each other like two wires no longer connected. If I learned anything through this, it is that steadiness is not a neutral posture. It is a choice that demands balance. There are times to be unflinchingly pragmatic and times to leave room for the messy, human things that refuse to be archived. The hardest part is knowing when to be which. On a late Tuesday, months after everything had unfolded, I walked past the kitchen where the agency posts sticky notes by the coffee maker. Someone had put up a bright yellow note that read, "Be brave. Be kind." I smiled, because I owed both to myself and to the people around me. I took a breath, and for a moment, pure and small, I let the memory of Daniel's hand warm my palm as it had before everything became evidence. I don't know whether I would do it differently if I had the chance. Some nights I would say yes. I would gather facts and shield people from cruelty. Other nights I would trade every single file and folder for the wrongness of losing him. Perhaps the real answer is not a binary one. Perhaps it is the long, difficult work of learning to be brave and kind at the same time, a project that, like us, must be built slowly, with mistakes tolerated and forgiven. The office learned. The team tightened. Claire's shouting faded into memory. I learned, painfully, that protection can isolate you as surely as exposure can break you. I am steadier now, and quieter in a different way. The sound of a person who keeps records, yes, but also one who is trying, imperfectly, to relearn the art of leaving room for mercy.